Greetings! In this video I'll be painting a tactical marine from the Firehawks chapter. For this one I've used a lot of custom parts, such as a Mark 8 torso and Mark 6 legs, with the rest being from a range of marks. I built this guy quite some time ago, so I'm not sure how much is printed and how much is plastic, but it's probably safe to say it's all printed. I based the build roughly off this reference image. Like usual, I embossed the pauldron and printed it myself. Printed component disclaimers are in the video description. Instead of going with a pure black base coat, I primed him black and then did an undercoat of grey cere with my airbrush. If you're wanting to follow along, you can just use a grey cere spray can instead if you prefer, or a similar light coloured primer. The first step with the brush was to base coat the entire model with an orange that's similar to the references I have. I used Squig orange for this, as it's kind of like a brick red colour, and I think it matches fairly closely, at least compared to the others in the Citadel range. Next was to do all the yellow bits. I used Averland Sunset for this, and unfortunately, it took way more coats than I thought I'd need to paint it in. I was thinking the orange would make the yellow go on easier, but I guess not. There's a lot of different parts I use yellow for, primarily the flames and the helmet design, but I also used it to base coat one of the pauldrons, with the other pauldron receiving a battle line tactical marking in yellow. The references show both pauldrons as yellow with orange tactical markings, but it took me until editing the reference images for this video for me to notice that. Considering each marine of the Firehawks gets unique markings, honouring their actions in battle, what I did's not too far-fetched. I also did the squad markings in yellow, freehanding a low gothic numeral, as they appear to be done in the opposite colour to the armour colour that's beneath them. I switched back to Squig orange to clean up some of the bits I went over on, before switching to Abaddon black to block in the undersuit and the eye lenses. The Firehawks use a blue-grey for their weapons, so I chose Thunderhawk blue for this. It took a few coats to get full coverage as it's a fairly thin paint. Next, I used Morghast bone to base coat the decorative bits that would normally be a metallic colour for other chapters. This meant the Aquila on his torso, the pauldron trim, any skulls present on the armour like on the helmet and the power pack, as well as the gorget trim, as this version has a visually separate edge, so I figured why not. Now onto Ulthuan grey for the helmet sensor, like this reference says, and to painting the company marking, which is displayed in a seemingly random position for each marine. I briefly went back to Morghast bone to paint in the rivets on the gorget, figuring there'd be fancy rivets for style and not necessarily practical ones. I also went back to Abaddon black to base coat the sensor lenses, like the eyes were done earlier. Now for the metallics. I used Iron Warriors for this, base coating in all the metallic parts like the weapon casing and the power pack details. The Morghast bone that I used earlier suits as a replacement for any gold in examples you see in other chapters. I'm always missing these details around the armour. At this point I went back to the Thunderhawk blue for the cabling around the legs, and for the cable leading up to the sensor on the helmet. I'd usually use red for cables like these, but Thunderhawk blue suits nicely as an alternative that doesn't risk blending in with the armour colour. Again, briefly back to Squig orange to clean up a few bits, before switching to Russ grey to do some highlights and light battle damage for bits that I painted with Thunderhawk blue. I also decided to use this as the reflection colour for the lenses. They appear black in the books with a slight orange tint, which I'm interpreting as reflecting the armour colour around them, so I decided a black would be interesting as an alternative. I definitely didn't want to do some glowing eyes that neither match the references nor would look like they'd stand out nicely against the orange and yellow armour next to them. Now onto some more highlights, this time the yellow, using Yriel yellow. I went over the raised surfaces with this, some edges too, but focused on a staggered approach, something akin to stippling, adding texture instead of trying to do a smooth transition. I also used this to paint on some rough detailing on the weapons, matching the weapon references earlier in the video. I was fairly apprehensive about highlighting the orange, as the Trollslayer orange that I used is very vibrant, but thankfully it doesn't draw too much attention. And I think it does help it stand out more as a fiery red-orange instead of a brick colour. Similar highlight work was done with Ushabti bone for the bone coloured bits. This was primarily applied as an edge highlight. Next, to highlight the silver from earlier, I used Runefang steel and did a rough edge highlight along all the upwards facing surfaces, along the chainsaw teeth, and also dotting in the rivets on the Mark 7 power pack. Now we're finally onto the enamel wash. I used the trusty Sepia Paneliner from AK Interactive, filling the panel lines of course, but also lightly layering it over the larger sections of the armour to add some grime. This is a fun process that really ties the model together. After finishing with the enamel, I left it to dry for a few hours. Then I applied my usual basing mix, painted the base rim, then sealed everything in with an ultramatte varnish. And here we have it! A tactical marine for the Firehawk's 5th Company, who I'm going to say is a preceptor sergeant of 6th Squad. This was a difficult paint job. The flames and the Gothic numerals were a challenge, but I've been wanting to try and get better at freehanding, so here we are. It's been a bit of a struggle though, as the humidity when I recorded this one was causing the paint to dry super quickly on the brush. So using a smaller brush wasn't really an option for those finer details. I should really invest in one of those fancy dehumidifiers. I built this model a while ago, back when I only knew a little bit about the chapter. I did know they were lost in the warp long before Primaris were a thing, so I stuck with pre-Primaris gear. But had I known what I know now, I'd have focused using Marks 3, 5 and 8, avoiding the other marks as they show a preference for heavy armour and field repaired or reinforced gear. The parts used in this video were printed a long time ago too, back when I was overzealous with supports, and as a result some detail was lost or blurred, like the skull on the power pack. I've gotten better with this, so my results have improved, but it's a difficult thing to get right. As for the paint job itself, I'm pretty happy with it. The flames look nice, if not a bit rough, and the weapons stand out nicely in that blue-grey colour. The yellow as well, which looks nice and weathered like I was hoping, due to the rough application I did. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. I hope you'll stick around for the next one.